1981 to 1990, Princess Diana had spent more than $1.9 million for her wardrobe. My brothers and my sisters, that averages out to about $200,000 a year. It included 95 evening gowns, 176 dresses, 178 suits, 54 coats, 141 hats, 71 blouses, 29 skirts, 29 sweaters, 350 pairs of shoes, 200 purses. This article also said that she spent $22,950 on underwear, $11,475 on stockings. Now, millions of women worldwide would have swapped places with Princess Diana in an instant. But just a few short years later, it became public knowledge how deeply unhappy she was. Her tragic death should have revealed to people everywhere how vain it is to live for this world's fame and fortune. But yet, we have people every day living for this world as if they are going to be here for eternity. For what does it profit a man or woman to gain the whole world and lose his or her soul? These profound words of Jesus ties us to the text in Acts chapter 26, because Luke describes how Festus, Agrippa, and Bernice entered the auditorium with great pomp and pageantry. They were accompanied by their commanders and the prominent men of the city. And if you ever watched the Oscars on awards night on television, you would have some idea of the glitter and the glamour of the rich and the famous, who are all trying to impress one another and the world at the same time. So into this superficial scene, the gods bring a little Jewish man in chains, the Apostle Paul, to speak about eternal truths. It's not a trial per se, but it's more like entertainment. Festus, he needed to know what charges he could write to the emperor concerning Paul. And Agrippa, who was somewhat an expert in Jewish matters, wanted to hear this man, this little bitty man who had stirred up such bitter and hateful opposition among the Jewish leaders. So they thought it would be fun to hear this man's peculiar story and discuss it afterwards over drinks and make jokes about this weirdo and his religion. So in the middle of the proceedings, after Paul had proclaimed the resurrection of Jesus, Festus reached his limit. According to the text, he shouted out loudly, "Paul, you're out of your mind. Your great learning is driving you insane." Paul calmly replied, "I ain't out of my mind, most excellent Festus, but I utter the words of sober truth." Paul then proceeds to target King Agrippa, seeking to bring him to personal faith and repentance. And this exchange, which puts Festus and Agrippa and Bernice on one side with all of their worldly pomp and show, and Paul, the prisoner for Jesus Christ, on the other side, it makes us ponder the question, who is really crazy? You have one group of people that full of show and pompous and pageantry, and you have another person that is the prisoner of Jesus, and yet it seems as if the world wants us to believe Paul is crazy. Sometimes you gotta ask the question, is Paul crazy? To give up all that this world offers to follow Jesus? Or are those world. That's the crazy person. The person who wraps up everything in this world. Martin Luther once said, I have held many things in my hands, and I have lost them all. But the things I have placed in God's hands, I still possess. Then there's this other gentleman by the name of Jim Elliot who was martyred at the age of 28. He wrote in his journal at age 22, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Let me say that again. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. See, these comments make perfect sense to the believer, and yet each of us would have to admit that this present world holds a strong attraction for most of us. Few of us who know Christ would abandon our faith in the favor of the world, but many professing Christians who try to live with one foot in each realm, hoping to get the best of both worlds. But tell you that you can't get the best of both worlds. Even Dismas, whom Paul at one point called his fellow worker, and Philemon, verse 24, deserted Paul because he loved this present world. That's why we all need to remember Jesus' words. You cannot serve God and mammon at the same time. And then John warns us in 1 John chapter 2, verse 15, do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. But then I got to ask you a question. Why would a person live for something as superficial and short-lived as this evil world? But then when we look at the lives of Festus and Agrippa and Bernice, we see at least 6 factors that shows us why some folks go crazy. And the first factor why some folks go crazy is a wrong view of success can cause us to go crazy and to live for this present world. Brother Pete, I remember once when President Bush was passing through Baton Rouge, the state troopers shut down the entire interstate until he passed through. Then that kind of power can easily go to your head, and it must have felt great to Festus and Agrippa and Bernice to be surrounded by armed guards, to step out of their royal chariots in their expensive robes and wave to the common people as they went up the steps into the auditorium. All of the invited guests bowed before them and greeted them with respectability. Servants stood by to wait on their every whim and need. In the eyes of the world, it seemed as if they had made it. But those whom the world considers successful are soon dead and forgotten. Festus will be dead in 2 years. If he, Agrippa, and Bernice had not had their names recorded in the Bible, no one today would know anything about them. Paul, whom most people in this city would not even cross the street in order to meet, but he was the most successful man in the room. It wasn't those that were crowded and guarded, but it was Paul himself, because Paul was living his life in the light of eternity. Can I tell you this? All of your efforts, if your effort is on making it in the world, that's crazy. If you love the world more than you love God, that's crazy. If you give this world your time, your talent, and your tithe, that's crazy. Because the only thing that this world can give you in return is headache and heartache. Number 2, trying to impress others while forgetting God can cause us to go crazy and to live for this present world. Listen, Festus and Agrippa and Bernice were like all the rich and famous, trying to impress others with their greatness. But their fatal mistake was that they did not give any thought about how to please and live for God. See, it's easy to fall into the trap of trying to impress others and forget that our focus should be on pleasing God, who examines our heart. That's why Isaiah 66:3 says, "This is the one I esteem, he who is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my words." God said, I'm not looking at the person who thinks that he's all that. I'm not looking at the person who thinks that he has made it and that he has all that he needs. I'm looking at the person that every time the Lord speaks, this person trembles. The Lord said, I'm looking at the person that has a contrite spirit, the spirit that means that I understand that I'm not yet where I ought to be. That person that's always striving, trying to get to the next step. See, you got some folks in your world that think they have made it and they really have not made it. Because number one, you can't make it without the Lord. And number two, you can't make it unless the Lord allows you to make it. See, the world is full of folks who say they have good sense, but yet they're trying to impress folks who don't like them or take the time to even notice them. That's right. You going to debt to impress somebody that don't even like you. Some of y'all right now spending a whole lot of money trying to outbuy somebody else in the family, but the devil is a lie. You can't buy somebody's love. You can only buy their attention for a spade, and sooner or later that time is going to run out. Sometimes it seems like if you're trying to buy somebody's love, they got you on a stopwatch, and when the time runs out, the love runs out. Tell your neighbor, that's crazy. And another thing about Festus and Agrippa and Bernice is that they put too much emphasis on reasoning without factoring in God's power. Festus, he was a person that rationalized everything, and for him, the notion that Jesus or anyone else could rise from the dead was just plain crazy. He thought that in spite of Paul's great learning, saying such a thing proved that Paul had either was about to lose his mind or had lost his mind. Because Festus, he believed in logic, and he believed in religious superstition, and he believed in psychology, and Festus said, ain't no way in the world man can get up after being dead. See, Festus' mistake was that he had not factored in God's power. Because see, God, who spoke the universe into existence by the word of his power, God can do anything he wants to do when he wants to do it. And I understand that we have a whole lot of intellectuals who don't believe that. I just believe that if God said it, that's it. So sometimes you got to move rationalization out of the way and just believe on faith. And I'm just crazy enough to believe that if God said it and it's in the Bible, then that means it's true. Listen, I can't deal with you in your humanistic points. Because see, God gives us a mind capable of thinking, and God don't mind if you use it. His word gives us many truths that require careful thinking in order for us to understand it. But if we exalt human reason to the point that we exclude God and his power or set aside his revelation in his word, then we fall into error. See, to leave God out means this world and all that we have. I can't do that. See, if I leave God out, that means that this is it. I can't do that. And the reason why I can't do that, my brothers and my sisters, is because that I have being embarrassed before others than being embarrassed before the Lord. See, that's some of you right now. You do more stuff for the sake of folks than you do for the sake of God. There's some of y'all right now can't even praise God like you want to because you thinking that somebody on the bench gonna look at you and say you crazy. You want to lift up your hands. You want to dance. Some of you brothers, you really want to do what you do at football games. You want to shout and scream. But there are some of y'all that don't do that because of your embarrassment. Let me tell you something. I would rather be embarrassed in front of you than be embarrassed in front of God. If the Lord has done anything for you, you ought to show. I wish I had some help. Show some sign. You ought to not care what nobody thinks or what they see, because guess what? It's the Lord that's been good to you. See, when Paul backed Agrippa into a corner with his pointed question, to save faith, Agrippa made light of what Paul was saying. Look what Agrippa says, in a short time, Paul, you will persuade me to become a Christian. See, something had stirred in his heart, but then when he looked out over the crowd and saw what everybody was doing, Agrippa said, wait a minute, I can't come to Christ in front of all these people. Because if I come to Christ in front of all these people, then they're going to look at me like I'm crazy. And I ain't got the time to be embarrassed in front of all these impotent people. What would they think if he took seriously what this controversial, crazy, Jewish little man was saying? So, with no regard for what the living God might think, Agrippa choked away his opportunity for eternal life. You get what I'm saying? Because of the fact that you don't want to be embarrassed. You would rather be cool and a fool than be safe and assured. Always a hands up. You, my brothers and my sisters, would rather, because of peer pressure, you want to do what the folks want you to do. Tell your neighbor, that's crazy. Let me tell you